Hi everyone. I was given a message that it was time for me to give a message. And the timing's good. And the message is there. I don't know how it'll come out, but let's hear it. So really this message is about how contented are you with where you are in your life. So over the next couple of breaths, just drag your awareness inside yourself and try and remember, where did you think you'd be, or where did you expect to be at this stage of your life? Is the reality meeting those early dreams or aspirations or expectations? And I suspect for a great many of you, as it was for me, that there will be a huge gap between those two things, where we thought we'd be, who we thought we'd be, what we thought we'd be doing, where we thought we'd be doing it, and who we thought we'd be doing it with. So, over the past lifetime, and possibly some before that, a few things have come to make sense to me. So, possibly the first one is that it was really easy for me to think that it's external forces that were shaping my world, or that were putting pressure and containing my ability or limiting my life. And it wasn't until I was actually able to look inside a bit that I realised that I'd pretty much always chosen the path of least resistance. And avoidance was a common thing that kept cropping up. And then I had to look a little bit deeper at, well, okay, if that's how I tend to have a default setting, why am I like that? And it wasn't until I realised that it was fear of people knowing me. I had to pretend to be this other thing, not just so that other people would think I was okay, but so that I would think I was okay. So I created rules and told lies about myself, and basically tried to live life in denial that anything was wrong. But of course, it's not really a good recipe, and that cake's never going to be that yummy, because what tends to happen when we get into that type of a way of living is that we end up disillusioned, disappointed, and often resentful. And for me to try and find peace with where I was living in this pseudo lie of a life, it made me resent anybody that had more than I did. And it made me look down on anybody that had less, so that I could be comfortable with my mediocre thing, which I wasn't comfortable with at all. So it was really bad on an internal level. It was really bad on an external level. I mean, I don't think you can have much more of a distorted life than that. So what happened? Quite often when we're young, as a child, we don't have a lot of experience, and we don't have the ability to rationalise things that much. So when things happen to us, and they don't have to be hugely traumatic, negative things, but when things happen to us that don't meet our expectations, we feel loss, because we have an expectation that isn't met. Now, every time that type of thing happens, it's the mind that feels the disappointment. It's the ego that's distressed because it didn't get what it wanted. And that's a really terrible thing, because when that happens at such a young age, quite often that type of negative feeling is the trigger for becoming protective. And becoming protective means that we don't want to take the blame for the things that we do. So we throw all of this negativity outside. It's the world's fault, it's his fault, it's her fault, they made me do it. And by doing that, we disempower ourselves. So the truth is that most of us do suffer from hurt in our life one way or another. Sometimes that is somebody else's fault and we are simply victims. Sometimes nothing really gets done to us apart from how we interpret information. But that's what we are. We're basically processes of experience. And if that happens, we end up, we have a choice. But many of us end up in a place where we're unhappy, we don't like the hurt, the brain takes over and becomes protective, and we start living from this protective point of view. So what that does is that takes us back to the start of the story, but where we rely on other people, on their validation and their opinions. That's how we judge ourselves. And it's not until you come to the realization that you can't please everybody. In fact, there's no guarantee that you can please anybody, because we're only guessing at what it is that they want. We're only guessing at the things that they like, or they'd like us to be. We're not them, we don't know. And so we end up playing this game of chasing tails, and it's not fulfilling, and it's hard work. So I sort of got to a point in life where I realised that, okay, so I had this vision of, as we go through life, it's like we're a stick in a creek. It's only a slow-moving creek, and the water's gently winding its way down, but there's bushes overhanging some bits and little eddies and little rapids, and we're the stick, and the creek is the metaphor for our life. And many of us just sort of tumble down the creek as we do. We get stuck in a bush occasionally, or twirl around in an eddy, or bounce down the rapids. And that seemed like a really good representation for life. But I thought the stick doesn't have any ability to change direction or assert any choice or create change. And if that's true of us, then what's the point of conscious life? Why do we have all this experience and this ability to feel and think and process and interact, whereas the stick is just the stick? And I thought, okay, well, that's pretty intriguing. So the next step was to think, well, we must have control. But where and what is that control? What do we have control over? And the more I thought about it, I narrowed more and more things down. So many things that we do does depend, or is really dependent on decisions that will be made outside ourselves. And we can do what we do. And when I looked back at some of the choices in my life, I realised that there were things that I really wanted to do. But no matter how hard I tried to do them, it was like block after block after block after wall after ditch. It wasn't meant to happen then. And no matter how doggedly I kept on trying it, I realised it just wasn't meant to happen. Those same things later on in life just happened effortlessly. And again, that sort of reinforced the thing, well, there are always external forces. But what do we, still back to this question, what can we control? As a person, as a sentient being that has awareness of, to a degree, the universe, particularly what we live in. So there was another couple of tiers there. I sort of started looking at reality. We talk about living in the real world and things like that, but that's a pretty subjective term. What is reality? And for a human, I guess it's the three-dimensional world that we exist within, the one that science explains to us and tells us that, the wall is made of solid matter, therefore, because we're softer than the wall, we cannot go through it unless there's a hole. And in that way we make sense, and we actually exist within our world, and we're able to apply certain things and create electricity and make machinery, and we live. But it also made me think that, if we look around a room and we see the solid objects in it, there's all this space between those objects. And even then, without understanding very much about science at a subatomic level, I realised that everything's made of matter, and there's just as much matter between me and the object as there is within me and the object. Yet, to us it doesn't exist. So I guess the easiest way to describe what reality ended up meaning to me was the fact that reality, pure reality, exists outside our ability to comprehend it, outside our sensory perception, if you like. It is what is, irrespective of what we think it is. It simply is. But then there's our internalized reality, and that is what we think is real. So back to the control thing. We live in this world, this reality that we do live in, and we do have expectations and things. And so we've already discussed, there are a lot of external forces. But we can't control what another person thinks, says, or does. So I thought, okay, so what is our control? As a person, as you sitting there listening to this right now, I want you to think about what is the one thing in whichever reality that you have total control over. So just think about that for 30 seconds or so. And so some of you may be still scratching your head, and some of you may have answers. And I'm not going to go into rights and wrongs because they're subjective things. But for me, the answer to what is it that I can control, absolutely, the only answer I could come up with was my choices. No matter what happens in the outside world, I always have a choice. I mean, an analogy I used to like to use with clients was if somebody came up to you and held a gun against your head and said, either do whatever this thing is that in the whole world would be the thing you'd like least to do. Do you have a choice? And many would answer straight away, no, because they'll shoot me. Okay, yes, they may shoot you, but do you have a choice? That's not the question. We're not talking about what their choice is. We're talking about, do you have a choice? And again, some of them would actually go, oh, actually, no, you know what? Yeah, I could still say no, but then they'll shoot me. And I'll go, okay, then, well, if they do pull the trigger and they shoot you, did you do whatever it was that they wanted you to do? And the answer was, oh, no. And that was quite a really nice way, I think, of pointing out the fact that actually we do have absolute choice over our choices. Nobody can ever make us do anything. So I guess there's the real big lesson one, is that whenever we blame someone else or we blame a circumstance that's outside ourselves, we take away our own personal self-worth. Because people and things will happen outside of us. We have no control over it. So my question to you is, what benefit is there in blaming them? If we can't influence it at all, and yet we give them all this power, going, oh, it's his fault, it's her fault, it's their fault, the organisation, the government, the world, the whatever. If that's not within us, how does that serve us at all? What possible good can come from that? And the answer for me was none. It simply detracts from me. I'm annoyed at something that can't benefit me. It's like being in a prison that can't be broken out of and rattling on the bars and keeping rattling on the bars, expecting them to dematerialise or something. So that was the first thing. So once I realised that choice was the only thing that really mattered, the only control I actually had, it was then, okay, well, here you are living this life of the path of least resistance. I would realise that quite often, because I was trying to validate myself through other people's acceptance or other people's thinking that I was good enough, that quite often after certain circumstances I would actually feel really bad. I mean, it was in the head, but it was more profound. It was more deeper than that. It was about such a disappointment because I had a truth to say and I didn't say it for the fear that whoever it was that I was talking to, they might not agree with it, they might not like it. But I was really disappointed in the fact that I hadn't done that. And quite often after those type of conversations, I'd actually have these things I'd actually be going, I wish I had have said that, and the words, the sentences were there, perfectly formed in my head of what I wanted to say. But fear had stopped me from doing it. So by now, I kind of understood the reality, or our reality we live in, what its limitations were. I understood that the only control I had in life was actually the control over my choices. I realised that I'd spent most of my life living protectively and seeking the validation from external things, which, if it didn't come, just simply led to resentment and disappointment. And again, when you're trying to apply cause and effect, which is if I do that to them, I'll get this. It doesn't work when you apply other people to it, because you don't know how they're going to react. And more often than not, they won't react the way you think that they will. It's almost like they're almost pre-programmed to react to the opposite. I don't know if you've found that, but that's certainly been my experience through life. And quantum physics actually tends to show that there's a reason that happens, because we're creating it through our head. So the lessons are, I was living externally, I was living protectively, I was expecting the outside world to fulfill me and meet my expectations, which was ridiculous, and I was giving my control away. So once I'd taken back control and acknowledged the fear, the protectiveness that was the driver for it all, I was struck by the realization that all of these things, all of them, existed in my mind. The protectionism, the projecting, the expectations, the resentment if I didn't get what I wanted, they were all from my mind. So that led me to the next bit. Okay, well, because why? I mean, why do we run through Why do we let our mind be the sole thing that determines our existence? And then I looked at, my life, and I went, okay, ever since you're young, it's like, oh, you're not doing that properly. Think about what you're doing. You go to school and they condition you and they tell you, it's all in the head, it's all in the head, it's all programming. And I realised that I don't think I ever had a choice, because I was so young and so naive. When they say, I use your head, or he's got his head screwed on, there's all these sayings about how important the head is. Basically, they teach us that the head, the brain, our ability to think and process is the most wonderful thing in the world. The heart is merely a muscle that pumps blood around the body. And it wasn't until a number of years ago that I was sitting there and I realised that, no, you know what? My head has been the cause of all of these things. It's been the cause of my unhappiness, my expectations, my wanting external validation, the way that I've been fearful, the way that I've been protective and not wanting to get hurt, the reason I've lived the path of least resistance. Everything was attributable to my brain. And then I stumbled across a heart math, heart cohesion meditation, and it was quite short. It only took a couple of 10 minutes or so, and for the first time I actually felt something. Just to give this some context, I tried meditation a lot of times. I've done various martial arts, and a big part of that was trying to still the mind and get in the zen, and I never could do it. I couldn't get my mind to make my mind quiet. I couldn't get my mind to make my mind calm. If I created calm, my mind would fill it up with more stuff. If I tried to make it quiet, it would scream. But the heart math method made me not care about the mind. Took the focus away from the mind and put it on the heart. And I must admit, for me, that was a huge changing point. Because up till then, on a psychological level or a cerebral level, I'd understood all of these problems. But I had never understood the fact that the heart was its own intelligent centre. In fact, up till then, if you had told me the heart contains its own intelligence, I probably told you, you're crazy. That flies in the face of everything that I've ever learned about everything, about the human body. But then I thought, okay, let's do some investigation. So particularly through heart math, I sort of checked out some of their stuff and some of the tests that they've done, and they actually proved that the heart was sending far more electromagnetic messages to the brain than the brain ever sent to the heart. Which kind of makes sense, because, it always struck me as quite a weird thing, particularly in the way Westerners view the human body. We have doctors split it up into various systems. So some doctors will deal with the brain, thought as, neurosurgeons or psychology or psychiatry, simply dealing with the brain. Then we have people who are heart or cardio specialists. Then you have orthopedics that just deal with the bones, the structure of the skeletal. So they're always separating these things up, and I thought, well, actually, it's kind of like a glass of water. The water without the glass doesn't really work. It soaks into the ground. The glass without the water doesn't really work. The human body is either complete or it's not. You take the brain away from the human body and you've got something that'll die, and it's vegetative. You take the heart away from the brain and the brain will die. Nothing operates independently away from everything else. It's all interreliant. And so then in more recent times I thought about, okay, so we've learnt about fear from the mind and how the mind has all of these things that don't enable us to be content in the moment, because the mind is always projecting, it's always expecting, and very seldom does it get what it wants. Why do we end up with people that have these huge goals and they achieve their goals and yet they're still fundamentally unhappy with their lives? What's going on there? So then finding more about the heart, it became down to, okay, well, when we do things, many of us find that we end up in a place in life where, rather than what I'd truly call living, we're existing. We're going through the motions of living. We go and do things. We get paid money, sacrificing our time for dollars. It puts food on our table and a roof on our heads, and the treadmill goes on. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to get into any conspiracy theories here, because this isn't about that. But let's just say that that works for the world and the way the world is right now. The more people that are like that, the better off the world is as far as those systems and the continuation of them goes. But it's not good for us as an individual level, unless you're doing something that you're quite content with. And so then I thought more about, okay, so we've got this, really came down to what should be controlling things, the brain or the heart. And I had a really good conversation with a dear old friend of mine yesterday, and we were talking about the heart versus the brain. And when I told him my theory about how important the heart was as an intelligent thing, he went, yeah, but the brain's really important, the brain's really... And I had to agree. I went, yeah, of course the brain's really important. Without the brain, what are we? We're a lump of meat that's capable of little or nothing, just, again, existing, hooked up to a life support machine or something. And the analogy sprang into my head that really, if we think of our life like that river with a stick going down it, it's kind of like our heart, really. We need to allow that to be the GPS to say, okay, I want to go from this part of the river to that part of the river. And in order to do that, I need to be over there. Now, for the sake of this analogy, of course, we're not the stick, because we're not a stick. We're a person in the river, either in a kayak or a little inflatable boat, or just in the river with a life jacket. And we can paddle, we can make choices which change our direction. We're still going to be pushed by the current of the river, and we probably can't swim or paddle against it, but which, like time in life, we can't. We are continually carried downstream. But what we can do is we can decide, there's a bank over there that looks really nice, I'd like to stop over there and actually climb out of the river and just sit on that rock and get some sun and be warm for a while, rather than be cold in the river. So if our heart becomes our GPS, and we follow the things that we really want to do, in this case, go to the side of the river and sit on the rock and be nice and warm, our brain is the thing that will tell us, our body, okay, right, we can work out between here and there, these 400 meters. That means I need to start paddling and kicking quite furiously from this point to go that way, so that we can end up there, or we're going to be on the other side of the river and we're going to miss it. So is the brain important for our journey through life? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a bit like driving your car. Without a brain, it wouldn't happen, would it? But again, if we use the analogy of GPS in a car, if you're going somewhere you've never been before, and you try and memorize a map and wing it, you might get there if you're really lucky, but chances are you're going to get lost or take a wrong turn or get frustrated, get angry, and be stressed out looking for signs, exit signs and things like that, to tell you that you are in the right place at the right time. Or if you're in the wrong lane on the motorway or freeway and you can't get to your exit point, it becomes a drama, and life can be like that. However, if we use the heart as a GPS and we just go, program it in. Where do we want to go? What is it from our heart that we want to achieve in our lives right now? What's something that's going to make me feel worthwhile as a person? It's going to satisfy something deep within me, my purpose or my passion. It's in line with my values as a being. And then we simply use the brain to allow us to drive the car following the directions of the GPS. Which of those two is easier? Yeah, I thought so. GPSs are really popular because they make life much easier. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes it's a nice adventure to switch the GPS off and just wing it. But if you really need contentment, if you really want to probably actually contentment, if we just talk about that for a little bit, contentment isn't achieving all your goals. That will only bring you contentment for the briefest of moments. Contentment is not having things. Again, that will only bring you joy for the smallest of moments. How content do you think you might feel if you sitting here now, you realise that, you know what, as a person, I don't rely on anybody else for my contentment. I know that I'm good. I know that I have value. I know that I can contribute to the world. And I know that I'm following my heart's purpose, my desires, my passions. And as long as I'm doing that, whether I've got there, whether I've achieved that or not, I still have contentment. I am content that I'm on the right path. Not that I'm at the end of the river, because the end of the river is change, it's death, it's whatever comes after this. Don't want to get to the end of the river. Let's enjoy the journey. There's a really old saying, life isn't a destination, it's about the journey that gets there. So, where does that leave us? We have two choices in life. You have two choices in life. You can choose to give that choice away, live through your mind, live reactively to all the external things in the world, and continue as you do it, a little bit like the Matrix, the blue or the red pill. Or you can ask your heart what it is that you really need to do, who you really need to be, and live in line with that. And that can enable you to be fearless. That can enable you to be content in this breath, not worrying about what happened yesterday, not worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow, but in this breath right now. If you know you're heading in the right direction, even though you're not there, you're okay. And when people do things that you don't agree with, you understand that people do things that you won't agree with. You don't take it personally. You don't have to react to it or get upset to it. It's a choice. And remember, that's what this is all about. What is the only absolute control you have in life? Choice. Well, I hope that that's been an informative journey. It's just a little bit of a story of my journey, where I've got to. And certainly since I am now trying to live within purpose and with passion and within my values as a person and a being, my life's, I can't even describe it. It's like flipping the coin over, the difference between heads and tails. It's the same coin, but the difference between day and night. And there's no way I'd ever go back. And that's not to say that once you've made that change, if you ever do make it, if you decide to, because it's your choice, that there aren't going to be tough times, because it's not in fact, we need the tough times. Without the rain, would we enjoy the sun? Without night to sleep, would we enjoy the day? Everything requires contrast. We need sadness to enjoy or to be able to appreciate absolute joy and bliss and happiness. If it was all joy and happiness all the time, which is what some of us think, it'd be nice to have a life that was all just nice and even. It wouldn't be nice at all. It would become boring and monotonous. Everything is cyclic. The seasons are cyclic. We are cyclic. And we have ups and downs. That's the nature of life, the nature of existence. So, my hope for you is that you manage whatever your passions, whatever your purpose, whatever your values, that you manage to make a choice that gets you closer to being who you need to be, so you can be as happy as you can be in this breath, because that's all that matters, this right now. Well, thank you very much for listening. Have a wonderful, wonderful day or night. It's been nice talking to you. Namaste.